April already feels like it was ages ago. I was getting ready to film this video and I was looking back at what I watched and read, and it's a lot of weight. That was only last month. I have been pretty nose to grindstone in terms of my day job lately, doing pretty long hours, and I've still been reading a lot, but I've had less time to reflect on what I've been reading. So I think there's a lot of blurriness for the month of April and the early part of May. But I did take a mini solo vacation in early April, which was nice. I just went to Chicago for a few days. I went to a concert. It was Hwasa, who's a K-pop singer from Mamamoo. Saw her in concert. I went to the Art Institute and had a great day at the Art Institute. And then I also splurged on the most expensive dinner I've ever eaten. I ate a 7-course tasting menu at the Coach House by Chef Zubair Mohajer. I'd never done a tasting menu before, so I was nervous about that. Not to mention I was alone, but I was seated at the bar where I could watch the chefs plate everything, and it ended up being a really good time. They have a seasonal menu, but the final dish is always this dish called duck Numidian, and it was so unbelievably tasty. I can see why they keep it on the menu all the time. I was kind of nervous about traveling alone because I haven't done it very much, and so I just wanted to reward myself with something special for being out of my comfort zone, and I'm glad I did it. I think the trip made me more confident to do more solo traveling in the future. But in the short term, I'm hoping to just get out and explore my own city more, especially now that it's warmer outside. But with all that, let me get into what I read and watched in the month of April. I finished 7 books and I watched 4 movies, and once again, it felt like a really strong month. I'm going to talk about everything I read first in order from least liked to most liked. And this month I read a good amount of historical fiction and at least one historical movie, but otherwise it was pretty eclectic in terms of genre and tone. With the emphasis on historical fiction, I think a lot of the books and films are about reckoning with the past and how that can be both painful and comforting, or painful but necessary. There is also a lot of exploration of disconnection and isolation from family and friends, and the limits of personal autonomy versus compromise out of consideration for others. The other thing I noticed is that there were a lot of estranged parents this month, including in the first book I'm going to talk about. And that book is The Last One at the Wedding by Jason Rekulak. This is a mystery thriller with a family drama focus, and I'd say it's the only book I didn't really like this month. I gave it 2 stars, but mystery thrillers aren't really something I enjoy in general, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. The Last One at the Wedding follows a man named Frank who has been estranged from his adult daughter for several years when he unexpectedly gets invited to her wedding. And Frank is eager to reconnect with his daughter, but as he learns more about her fiance, who is the son of a tech billionaire, he more and more believes that something is amiss with this wedding. The story centers around Frank trying to uncover the truth while he's at this wedding and navigating this fragile reconciliation with his daughter. This is not something I would usually pick up anyway, except my hairstylist and I talk about books, and she was reading this one, so I thought I'd branch out of my comfort zone and give it a go. And indeed, it didn't really end up being my thing, but I didn't hate it either. I think the main character was an interesting narrator and had a really strong voice. He kind of rode the knife's edge of likability, which is one of the things I liked about the book. But my major complaint with it was mostly that I thought the twists were pretty predictable or really heavily telegraphed for a good portion of the book. So there wasn't much thrill with it. And I think the core themes of the story might resonate with someone else more than they resonate with me. So I think a lot of the core themes are about parenthood and the ability to see your child clearly and to protect them and control them as they grow up. those aren't things that I necessarily feel like I need to reckon with in my day-to-day life. So maybe that would hit harder for someone who is a parent. My next book also involves an estranged parent. It's Fundamentally by Nussaibah Younis, and I filmed a standalone video for this one, so I'll try to keep my discussion here a little shorter. But to summarize what it's about, Fundamentally follows a British academic named Nadia who accepts a UN position in Iraq to lead a de-radicalization program for women affiliated with ISIS. This book has very serious subject matter, but it is a satire, and Nadia's academic work theorized about this de-radicalization program, but she has no experience on the ground. So there's a lot of dark humor in this book about bureaucracy and cultural misunderstandings. But the book is also about identity and connection. Part of the reason that Nadia accepts this position that she's not really qualified for is that she is reeling from a breakup with a girlfriend, and she is estranged from her really devout Muslim mother. So she's processing that while also really latching onto a girl in the camp who is from London and who joined ISIS at 15, but who also reminds Nadia of herself in many ways. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I liked the humor for the most part, and it was obviously written by someone who is drawing from personal experience and can find the humor in it. And I thought it was really unique. The next book I read was also funny, but in a more lighthearted way in its subject matter. I finally read All Systems Red by Martha Wells because one of my friends from work loaned me her copy, and it was a blast reading it. This is the first book in the Murderbot series, which is about a security cyborg who hacks its governor module and now calls itself Murderbot. However, at least at the beginning of this story, despite its autonomy because it hacked its governor module, it's still doing its job and pretending everything is normal, but it's just doing that while watching hundreds of hours of soap operas without anyone knowing that. Murderbot has basically been loaned out as protective equipment by a huge corporation to a group of scientists on a planetary survey, and so it's protecting those scientists. But when a neighboring survey team's comms go dark, the team then has to figure out, are they in danger, who from? I really enjoyed this because Murderbot is such a compelling and relatable character. Murderbot hates its boring job. It's always making digs at the way this corporation is morally bankrupt, and it's always thinking about, well, this is what my governor module would require me to say to these clients, but this is what I really want to say. And with the way my job has been lately, I really appreciated the humorous banter about corporate work. Murderbot is also highly socially awkward and anxious, especially as its clients try to interact with it more and treat it more like a person than a thing. And it's just a really cute, funny story, but it also sets up some really interesting sci-fi questions about personhood and autonomy, and I'm excited to see where the rest of the story goes. There's also an Apple TV series adaptation of this series coming out like next week actually, so maybe it's time for me to finally get a subscription and follow along with the TV series too. Now, the remaining 4 books I read last month, I filmed separate videos talking about. So again, I'm going to try and keep it shorter here and direct you to those reviews for more detail. But one of the videos I filmed in April was one where I talked about 3 different Han Kang books, and those are The Vegetarian, We Do Not Part, and Human Acts. I just poked myself in the eye, don't worry about it. I enjoyed all 3 of those, and it was really rewarding to read them together and think about how Han Kang revisits the same themes and symbols throughout her work. They are all concerned with violence and trauma at the level of the individual and the family unit, as well as the level of the larger community. And We Do Not Part and Human Acts are more similar to each other, I think, than either is to The Vegetarian, because they both reckon with specific historical massacres that occurred in modern Korean history. whereas The Vegetarian is more symbolic because it explores one woman's choice to stop eating meat and then stop eating altogether, and the way the people around her react to that. And I liked all three of those books, but Human Acts was my favorite. I thought the structure was really interesting since it spirals out with different characters' voices from the events of the Gwangju Uprising to the present day. And then finally, I reread Niccolò Rising by Dorothy Dunnett. I adored this book, as expected, and I have a separate spoiler-free review for this one as well. I'm really proud of that review, so please go watch it if you are interested to learn more about why I love this book so much. But in summary, it's got beautiful historical detail and a clever but confounding protagonist and complex alliances and political intrigue and family drama. Anyway, the next book in the series is called The Spring of the Ram, and this takes place primarily in Trebizond in 1461, which is the year the city and the empire of Trebizond fell to the Ottomans. So I'm excited to get to that one this month or next month. Moving on to what I watched, I did not watch any TV in April, and I only watched 4 films, but they were all great and they were all original IP. They weren't based on pre-existing material, which is really refreshing. Also, 3 of these movies are under 2 hours, which is refreshing. The first movie I watched was One of Them Days, directed by Lawrence Lamont and starring Keke Palmer and SZA. This one was released in theaters in January of this year, but I never got to the theater to see it, so I ended up watching it when it was released on Netflix. This is a buddy comedy about a pair of roommates who need to scrape together their rent money in a single day or they face eviction. I thought the chemistry of Keke and SZA was fantastic, and it felt really familiar and classic in a really comforting way. Sometimes you just need to watch a funny movie about the power of friendship, and that's what this was. I also really enjoyed The Ballad of Wallis Island, directed by James Griffiths. This is about a socially awkward lottery winner, played by Tim Key, who lives on a remote island and invites his favorite musical duo of all time to give a private performance on this island for an obscene amount of money. However, this musical duo broke up professionally and romantically years ago, and one member of the duo, his character's name is Herb McGuire, is blindsided by the fact that the other half of the duo is there. And not only is she there, she's accompanied by her new husband. So the comedy aspect is built off of this forced proximity in the presence of an aggressively socially clueless patron, but it also tugs at the heartstrings as it explores nostalgia and loneliness and the power of music. I'm a sap, but I did cry in the theater at this one. So I really thought it was good. The next 2 movies are contenders for my favorite films of the year so far. The first one is Black Bag by Steven Soderbergh. This was a tight 90-minute spy thriller, but I should emphasize that it is really espionage driven rather than action driven. Black Bag is about an intelligence officer named George, who's played by Michael Fassbender, and he is tasked with finding a mole in the organization from a list of 5 suspects, and one of those suspects is his wife, who is played by Cate Blanchett. This was very smartly written and directed with these tense, layered conversations, and the cinematography is really purposeful and does a lot of work to track the attention of the characters. It's definitely a movie lover's movie. The last film for the month of April that I watched is Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler. This is a vampire story set in 1930s Mississippi, so racism and racial conflict is an important part of the narrative and the social backdrop here. We have a pair of twins, both played by Michael B. Jordan, arriving home to Mississippi from Chicago, and they're setting out to stage a grand opening for a new juke joint the very same night. So it's a story that takes place over the course of a single day, and it's really impressive how much world building is established within that constraint with regards to the exposition of personal relationships and personal histories, as well as supernatural lore. Racial division is explored, but also the unifying power of music across time and place. The use of music as a central plot device is really what makes this movie stand out, and the soundtrack is phenomenal. Black Bag was really impressive in the precision of the filmmaking craft, but Sinners has a couple of scenes that just reach these euphoric heights. I've seen a couple people speculate that there could be spin-offs using this Sinners IP, given how popular this movie was. And personally, I wish we'd just let great standalone pieces be, but I do see how the concepts and lore laid out in this movie have people wanting more exploration of this world. So that's it for what I read and watched in April. Despite how busy I've been with work, I feel like it's been a really strong month for my personal content consumption. It's been a lot of really good books and movies. So please let me know your thoughts on any of the books or films I mentioned and what you're excited to get to in the month of May. Until next time.